Secretary of Homeland Security Kirstjen Nielsen is set to leave the Trump administration on Wednesday. The president announced her departure yesterday after a meeting at the White House. It is unclear whether Nielsen resigned on her own or was pressured to step down. Trump and Nielsen visited the California border town of Calexico on Friday as the administration focuses on the surge of migrants crossing the U.S.-Mexico border. CBS News senior national security analyst Fran Townsend joins me now from Washington. She served as Homeland Security and counterterrorism advisor to President George W. Bush. Fran, good to see you this morning.
Good morning, Vlad.
So you worked with Secretary Nielsen during your time at the White House. Just for our audience to understand, what is she like? Because I think a lot of people were surprised to see her implementing some of these policies. There are reports that she had clashed with the president on numerous occasions. If you believe what the New York Times is reporting, there were instances where she pushed back on some of the things that President Trump wanted to do because she knows the law. She's been a civil servant for many, many years. You worked with her. You know her. And so I'm just trying to get a sense of why she decided to go along with some of these policies, these zero tolerance policies that separated children from their mothers, and why you think she's resigning now.
So the one thing that Secretary Nielsen was known for throughout her career is how hard she works. I mean, she was notoriously one of the first people in the morning and one of the last people to leave at night. She is dogged and determined. And so I think she approached her job as secretary in that very way. She was in the details. She understood what the law and what the limits of the law were. And so to the extent people are saying she pushed back on the president, the things he wanted to do, I think that's a little bit of a sort of mischaracterization. She was very aggressive about implementing the president's agenda, but she would only do it, as we'd expect, within the limits of the law. And she made the case. The law does need to be changed. Look, I think that she will be known for this family separation policy that she defended. But she was willing to do what the president asked of her within the limits that the law allowed.
And so now, according to reports, President Trump, well, not even according to reports, the president is on the record saying that he wants someone tougher for the top immigration enforcement role. What would that look like to you, given that it's been pretty tough already?
Well, it's the right question. Now, I'm not sure how much further the president thinks they can go, but the administration really needs to engage Congress. It is true, as Secretary Nielsen has made the case, and the president, that they need to update and change the immigration laws. I'll give you one example. So if a child comes across, accompanied or unaccompanied, from Mexico or Canada, the U.S. government has the ability to return them to family in their home countries. They're not able to do that outside of Canada and Mexico. And so you wind up with this problem of family separation inside the United States with children in the system. Now, there's not much of an excuse for why they can't keep track of these children, right, and then later reunite them. But it's been a problem, and some of this is the immigration law.
So let me ask you about Stephen Miller, Fran. What do we know about the policy differences between Stephen Miller and perhaps Secretary Nielsen and others in the administration? There are reports out there that part of this was engineered by Stephen Miller.
You know, Vlad, I don't know Stephen Miller, and I haven't had the opportunity to speak to him about sort of if there's a difference in his policy view from her. I think because she came with Secretary Kelly, from the time he had been Secretary of DHS into the White House, she was viewed as sort of his person and not necessarily a Trump person. And I think that did hobble her. Look, in any administration, loyalty matters. And so I think she was viewed with some suspicion by those who had been with President Trump from the very beginning and were loyal to him.
Fran, let's just talk about policies that may be implemented that have a greater impact on what we're seeing at the border. For example, would you say, in your estimation, in your experience, that cutting off assistance, for example, as President Trump did, the three countries, Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras, could potentially lead to a surge in migrants trying to cross the border? Or the president announcing that he expects to close the southern border between the United States and Mexico, that would have an impact on people saying, look, border's going to close, I better get in before that happens?
So on the assistance question, I talked to folks last night in sort of ICE and CBP, Customs and Border Patrol, and they'll continue to provide technical assistance. What does that mean? Well, assistance to their law enforcement and immigration authorities in those countries of origin. The president has talked about cutting off financial assistance. I think I believe what the president is getting at is if that money, we're going to give money to those countries of origin, they ought to be accountable for their immigration policies and immigration enforcement. I mean, it remains to be seen, but frankly, this is a host country problem. Part of the issue I've never understood is why not appoint an envoy with business experience to go down there and make a judgment about how do you encourage foreign direct investment to create jobs there. People want jobs. People want to feel safe. And so if you provide technical assistance and you engage the private sector to create jobs and manufacturing there, you might reduce the flow. I do think it's a problem when you announce you may close the border, you run the risk that people are going to try and get across it before you close it. You're better off if you're going to try to do something like that, to do it and not sort of pre-warn about it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Let me ask you about this. President Trump named Customs and Border Protection Commissioner Kevin McAneilan as acting Homeland Security Secretary. Do you know him? Does he have the range of experience to be able to handle all of these Homeland Security threats that are just beyond the border? Because I know the president has focused, and his Twitter feed is primarily focused on immigration and what's happening on our southern border. But Homeland Security Department has a host of threats, including cyber, and that doesn't seem to get a lot of attention, at least if you're just following what the president is saying on Twitter.
So let's just start with the idea. No secretary comes in with expertise in all the areas, as you point out, that Homeland Security is responsible for: cyber, natural disasters, customs and immigration. You're never going to have a secretary that comes in with the experience in all of those. McAleenan is a pretty impressive guy. I can understand why the president has confidence in him. Look, he's implementing through this crisis the administration's policies. There's also depth in that agency, right? The deputy there is a guy by the name of Bob Perez, who's very well respected in terms of field operations and will be in the position to be the acting commissioner. And so it happens to be a component of DHS where there's a lot of depth, a lot of capability, and they enjoy the president's confidence. So I think that's an appointment that makes an awful lot of sense to me. In fact, I think McAleenan, who also has some experience in disaster management and recovery from his time working in the Bush administration, is a very good choice. I think he'd be a fabulous choice if the president wanted to nominate him permanently.
All right, Fran Townsend, always great to have your insight, your analysis, your expertise. Fran, thank you as always.
Thanks, Vlad.